which is incredible. I've just so you know, I've been pushing for that for a while.
Yes.
And we worked on, I would say the crux of what we really started working on was erotic justice. And it was really, it's so interesting. It's such interesting times. It's really crazy in so many ways. And, I often start by talking about my Instagram experiences.
Right.
But, I put this post up, and the post was about very much the theme of erotic justice, which is, first of all, erotic justice is for who it makes you, not for what it does in the world, but it may have a positive effect in the world. That's the intention. But I'm of the deep-seated belief, deep-seated belief that hate does not drive out hate, and that there is no way that you can operate from hate. You can do the most seemingly beneficial things on the planet, and somehow they will get corrupted if the source that they're coming from is hate.
Absolutely.
So I put up this post, and the post was, the post is actually a really radical post. It's very similar to the idea of call, but it's that you have the power to steer the world from a position of what you draw forth. And that if a people were to do that, we would have a lot more power. And that the power of resistance, the power of hostility doesn't actually move anything. In fact, it feeds the fire, it feeds the flame, and then it just goes back and forth. This flame over here, and then this flame over here. So, but I dared to put Elon Musk's person as the example, because this is one of the places on that particular day I just saw people losing their minds. But it could be Harris, it could be AOC, it could be Trump. The person was irrelevant, and so it was very interesting to see. First of all, I'm clear that people don't read whole posts.
I see.
Like they just start losing their mind by the second frame. And then but then even when they do, the blindness that our hate creates that has us, and this is the reason I put it on there, is the same reason I put everything on there. You lose your power. Makes you powerless. Your hate makes you powerless. If it worked, I'd trust you.
You'd use it.
I really would. But my only interest is for individuals to find their own power, so that collectively we find our power. When we collectively find our power, we'll be operating as powered people. Powered people operate ethically and compassionately. It's really simple. It's not that. Oh my gosh! And then the various responses in terms of what people felt they needed to do in response. So many felt they needed to educate me. And so I would say to them, I know you feel the need to educate me, but this isn't about Elon. Can you actually write to the topic? And here's the thing, they couldn't. And the thing is that it was so interesting, because you can see, this is what the conclusion that I came to, and we can kind of go back and forth. Is that when you're powerless, you have to stay on the surface. When you stay on the surface, you can only stay in content. And in content, you're buoyed around back and forth by this content goes here, today we love it, we hate it. But if you stay down here in the principles, then you there's a sort of freedom that you have. First of all, you have a freedom to see who you're actually aligned with, that has nothing to do with the content. But secondly, you can see. So the people who had, to me, what was a knee-jerk response, that I was supporting a fascist or a Nazi, and I again and again, I'm going to say, I hope everybody hears this. I cannot believe the way that we have started applying terms like Nazi, and how harmful that is to people whose families have had experiences that were linked to something as abhorrent as the Holocaust, and that now we're just throwing the term around, and it's an insult, I think. But so maybe we'll just start today with principles before politics.
Got it.
And then kind of we can begin to play with it and play with some ideas and see where we get to. What do you think?
I love it. I think your favorite lawyer used the phrase last week in court. When is the government going to take its head out of the sand?
So
and
good.
I think she said that like several times. And it was just really interesting to me because I think I've been dealing with that just because of the politics, which, I mean, I think you know where I stood on this latest political skirmish. That, okay, I'm just not going to deal with it. So I don't even think I'm in the opposition stage yet. I'm still just my head's in the sand yet. Like, things aren't changing, things didn't change, that type of thing. So I'm kind of gradually, maybe by the end of the first quarter of this year, I'll, get it out of the sand. But I think when we started talking about politics in that way, first of all, for all of you, like, even though I was asked to collaborate on the book, I didn't really understand the concept until you showed me the cover for the movie Poetic Justice.
Yeah.
Right? And I was like, oh, okay, this is kind of a play on poetic justice.
Yeah.
And poetic justice is a process of reconciling, the rights and wrongs, I guess, of personal dynamics in a way that sort of like is, has some kind of pentameter or some kind of rhythm to it that rhymes with the universe, right?
Beautiful.
And I think when we're coming through erotic justice and using it as a metaphor for reconciling the challenges of personal identity or group identity with the broader society, I think you did a step-by-step analysis of sort of what are the elements of these sort of movements, where do they go wrong, what are the challenges, and I think you reduced it down to essentially the challenge is that you have not reconciled exactly who you are and what you want.
That's right.
And so eventually, and you spell this out, by step in the book. I wish I had the copy with me, but there's various instances where you become so caught up in fighting against what you don't want that you reify it.
Right.
You make it larger.
That's it.
Yes.
That's
So
it.
go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have to come up with a term for that. Because this is what I see again and again and again and again, where people are righteously destroying their own platform. Or like, see, the reification actually creates the opposite. And this has been my argument all along, and that is that the left created Trump. There is no question in my mind exactly how it worked in terms of the math, but people keep doubling down, and that doubling down creates the reification. The reification creates the force counterforce. And just today I was thinking, who is it going to be? Who will it be? Right now, you have to know. I mean, in my mind, I'm going to pull your head out of the sand.
No.
because there has to be somebody who says we're one. The story in the Bible where the judge, both women are saying, this is my baby. And the judge says, okay, well, just cut the baby in half and you can have it. And then one woman says, no, no, she can have it. She can have it. And then when that happens and the judge says it's your baby, who's going to love the United States enough? Who's going to love this child enough to say, I will not tear it asunder? And right now, I would say the Republicans are winning in that all of the Democrats are fleeing over there because we can't get the doors of the Democratic Party open enough. I mean, not only do they, I say they now, we, I don't know, I'm so mad, I don't know where I stand, but not only do we make it untenable to remain, it's virtually impossible to remain, in my mind, like, because you have to say, like, I agree to every single one of these beliefs, absolutely, and if not, I'm out. And not only do you have to do that, but there's a way that oh, if somebody leaves, they demonize them like they are the eternal devil. You know, like what they did to Tulsi Gabbard. You know, the top 4 people in the Republican Party are former Democrats, recently former Democrats.
Right.
So we have to look at how do we, I mean, all of us. I mean, this is my mind, because I'm not a political. I'm a karmic. That's what I'm interested in, is the karma. And then the karma makes it that you can just say, this will not work. The road you're going down will never work. It's never worked historically. It will never work. It's impossible for this to work. And then, but the issue is that at this point in history, there's so much reactivity that people hear that as you're for, you know, fascism. No, I'm just saying that I'm for efficacy. And I care about the whole, and the whole will never come together in this way. How do we do it? What's your thoughts?
I guess I mean, I feel like, you know, it can be very confounding and probably personally, you know, seem confronting, where people who you think or thought were allies, or who you've been allied with in the past, view you as betraying the cause, because you've kind of seen what's going on and adapted to it more quickly. As I said, you know, my head's still in the sand. So the other side of that is that the Republican Party went through this already 4 or 5 years ago, or it's in an ongoing process in which it kind of overthrew its own stalwarts. Trump was never a political traditional Republican, nor was the vice president, nor was, you know,
Elon
Gabby or Gabby or JFK. Right. And so what exists today as quote unquote the Republican Party bears very little resemblance to what it looked like 10 years ago.
Totally agree.
And so they were the first party to sort of ungo this. And it was a very painful process within, you know, I was in DC for some of that.
Right.
And seeing, you know, all the people and institutions that were traditionally, you know, running things like gradually fall off. The Democrats are just starting to go through that, in the sense that I think everyone sensed that there was, it was forced upon us. So we did hide our head in the sand by electing Biden. I mean, that was a hide your head in the sand move for sure, because we had to ignore a lot about him, what was going on with him, and, you know, really what he was bringing to the table, in order to avoid what we thought was the inevitability of another Trump presidency, right? So it wasn't like anyone voted for Biden. I know I certainly didn't. Like, I just voted against Trump.
Right.
And then when it came around, second time around, where it was impossible to ignore, right? Even with your head really far in the sand, you know, the obvious weaknesses with this sort of ruling coalition. Still people sort of clung to the shreds and the tatters of it. But I think that's the thing. Like, can political party, I won't even call it an opposition party, but let's just call it an alternative political direction, be born of some sort of new mandate, right? Rather than just in opposition to.
Yes.
Because I mean, that strategy has plainly failed. So just as a practical matter, you know, what are we rather than what are we not? And I think that question is something we've avoided.
That's what I've been, that's the whole of, that's in erotic justice. That's been the argument all along. You can't define yourself by what you aren't or what you're opposed to. And it's so, see, all of these to me are basic, like masculine, feminine, and I'm going to say man, woman principles. Like, you know, as a woman, so I have so much training in this. And so you learn the best way to actually get what you want when you're pissed off. You learn this in Om. So you're getting stroked, and the stroke is terrible. It's a really bad stroke, and the instinct is to, you know, knock their hand away or tell them they're a terrible stroker or get tight or get mad. And you learn the only way to get what you want is to say, oh, you know, your hand on my leg feels warm. You start with rapport. You start with something that can de-escalate their trying to do a good job in their mind, consciousness. And so you connect, and then you make an adjustment. It's very simple. And you say, well, you move to the left. Then they move to the left, or they don't move to the left. And you say, I appreciate the warmth, or I appreciate that you moved to the left. Thank you. And so there's a way to do it. And that's what we didn't do. We just didn't do basic human communication. This is when I say I'm karmic rather than political, or in principles rather than political. So if you, whatever you're in, the left lost their minds, and I think put their heads in the sand and forgot everything that is the platform of the left: humanity, kindness, all of these basic elements. And this is also where it's like a woman, in that it was so triggered that in the triggering there was reactivity rather than strategy. And that was what I wanted to see. Oh, okay, we have so much rage, we have so much fire, we have so much. What if we drove it down into actually determining what we want to see, what we stand for, and not deviating from that no matter what, and not letting anybody steal our attention. That's this is what my posts are usually. They're usually something to the effect like, you are letting someone steal your attention. It doesn't matter if you're yelling at them when you do that. That doesn't discount it. You have just enslaved yourself to somebody else. And so there's this way that people feel so gripped by Trump, and they blame Trump. No, just look in the other direction. Look in the other direction and start creating. Or if you're super powerful, this was my post, massively powerful, Aikido it. Make the you are clear that Democrats can go over here, and that Democrats from within have the power to make change. What if the Democratic Party were attractive enough, and as opposed to bees and honey, in such a way to, and this is what I would say to every woman about a man. If he's driving you crazy, if he's a narcissist, you actually are much more, and you aren't going to leave him, then you're much more effective to draw him in, get him out of his ego, and then be clear about what your desire is again and again, every time, like the first time. So what do you think about that?
Well, I think that the people who are effective in building, people on the left who were effective in like getting at least some priorities done in the first administration did employ that strategy, such as Van Jones, such as Kim Kardashian. These are people who are not like, born in the wall conservatives, but I think that they stayed focused on what their priorities were, and were able to sort of, be attractive enough to to withhold sort of like the harshest of ad hominem attacks against him, in order to get some things done. But it's so tempting to fall into that. And I think I was in that world, in that fugue for like 2 or 3 years of like being so distracted, as you said, that maybe I lost sight of my priorities. I definitely know it affected my friendships and personal relationships. But I think I did realize that at a certain point and kind of come out of it. So this time around, though, I think that there's major, if we're gonna, like, I'll take my head out of the sand just for a few minutes, right, while we talk. So if you look at like some of the shifts that are going on, so there's this sort of deinstitutionalization, which I think we've kind of been praying for in some ways on the left, in the sense that we're saying, look, we've gotten all these complexes, the military-industrial complex, these corporate complexes, these medical-industrial complexes, which were the result of edifices that we created out of our own fears, right?
That's right.
We talk about that in erotic justice, right? How something becomes a complex, right?
That's right.
So then these things are being sort of deconstructed and dismantled, and maybe not in the way that we envisioned that they would be deconstructed and dismantled. So it's like when they say like, oh, they closed down USAID. I mean, having lived and worked in Africa for several years, I did not agree with the USAID. A lot of what, not just USAID, but other sort of like national sort of aid agencies were doing in places, like Southern Africa, Eastern Africa.
Right.
I'm not going to go into all the details, but there was a lot going on.
But it's interesting that,
yeah.
Anyway, okay, go ahead.
And so we'd kind of sort of like, maybe we can reform these agencies, but fundamentally they were just not set up to do anything really good, right?
Yeah. Sustainably
beneficial. They were not. So then you look at the deconstruction of these institutions. And so some of us are like, wow, like, okay, how dare you like fire the municipal workers, or how dare you sort of deconstruct these things when we wanted them deconstructed? We really did. And secondly, the opportunity is to build new ones.
Yes.
And so if we,
yes!
so if to the extent that the government cedes some responsibilities, right, back to either the states or to individuals, say healthcare, say even foreign aid, like if you do want to make a difference in Burundi or wherever, right, Colombia or Brazil, or there's many opportunities for individuals to develop frameworks and projects and stuff, that, would probably, if you were to do them under the current regime of USAID, be like opposed if you were to go to a country and like step on their turf and do things.
I totally agree with you.
So can we, pull our heads out of the sand a little bit, and then are we willing then to, because this is the question, this is the moment, like the opportunity is here. If you're going to have something to say about it, then you should also be willing to do something about it.
So I mentioned how you had said sometimes you and your friends will be talking, remember this? We'll be talking politics, and then and you said, but I love to talk about it. I don't necessarily want to do something about it.
That's harder than talking.
That takes so much courage to admit that, but I think that's the case. I think one of the things I do with people on my Instagram that are going crazy is I say, what are you doing? Because what I found is the people who go the craziest are the people who are doing the least. And so they just have all the tumescence, they have all of the buildup. But I want to go back to what you said, because it's quite important, I think. I'm trying to lay down these tenets or principles or ways for people to navigate to get the result. See, I think there's one human result that we want, and that it looks different. It's like Babel on the way, right?
We were just talking about that.
So there's all these ways that it's looking kind of crazy, and you cannot see how it will reconcile. So what I keep suggesting is you hold your portion no matter what, and that's you just keep, and it's always possible. Your portion is always possible. The distraction is actually sloth. It's actually a way that people justify not doing their portion. But but what you said that was so great for me is when you said it didn't happen the way we wanted it, or maybe it didn't happen the way we thought it would. And that's what happened for me with AI. In Buddhism, and you really believe that the planet will become enlightened, everything will become enlightened, you will step into the celestial mansion. And so I've always believed that. So then I'm sitting and I'm watching The Singularity is Near, and they're talking about everything becoming conscious. And the table will be conscious, the stars, everything. You see a different field around the planet, and I'm sobbing at the lack of. And then I realized, it just didn't happen the way that I hoped or imagined it would happen. But you can't imagine how it will happen.
Right.
So that's one thing. And then the other thing that I want to say is, we talk about the dissolution of these, venerable institutions, and I think everyone wanted that. I think there are some people who are afraid about how it's happening, who are putting some things forward, and there are people who have agendas about how it's happening that might not be so good. I'm not a big privatization person.
Right. So I think you're alert to those potential pitfalls of
every minute of every day
deconstruction. But yeah, I think.
I mean, what I always say is like, I love this today.
Right.
And that's one of the beauties of being politically homeless is that if, I'm transient. So if this goes wrong, I'm going, I'm going where the principles go.
So, I see. So you can always have a home in principle.
Yeah.
Even if you can't have one in a party.
I'm a little hermit crab.
Right. You take yours with you. You take it with you. You take your home with you. Yeah.
But I think that, we've wanted these institutions to dissolve, but I think we there's this point that we're missing. And I think I hear, mind you, this is projection. I'm going to give Elon credit, and we'll see how you.
I'm not geared up for war over this. Yeah.
We'll see how you feel about it, and we'll see how it goes. Both, but see, I think he sees. I saw this great piece on how, Trump. This was actually a liberal. But they said they were wise. I thought they were wise because I used to say this back in the day. Trump isn't here as a Republican. Trump isn't here as a Democrat. Trump is here to destroy the system as we've known it. And the person then said, it would have happened with or without Trump. I was like, thank you, Jesus. Somebody is seeing what I'm, thesis, antithesis, synthesis. We're hitting this point. You have to lose everything here to make it here. And then, but the thing that I'm going to give Elon credit for is I think he knows these jobs within 5 years, probably less, will be non-existent. I think he knows that AI is coming over to take over everybody's jobs, and that it's less scary to be mad at a political party than it is to be mad at something foreign and untamable and uncontrollable that is going to come in and wash the world in a very different way. Everything that I see happening, and there are some things, I have my concerns too.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
There, definitely privatization. I mean, the privatization of prisons is the most just abominable, ridiculous thing it's just insanity. And then the thought that we would do that with water and forests, and it's stupid. That's how I feel about that.
Absolutely.
But I do feel that I also feel that won't matter. and that I don't think that's where we're going to be living. I don't think we're going to be living, first of all, in carbon. And then I don't think we're going to be living in this place where I think we'll be living in such abundance, odd abundance, because I want you guys, did you see the new AI Grok thing?
Well, we were just discussing it before you came in, but go ahead. Yes.
I want you to see it.
Yeah.
And I did it yesterday. I don't know about people here, but for me, what happened when I saw that was, oh my God. I consider myself at the bleeding edge in a lot of ways, but I hit first of all, I hit I'm just a little thing. And then I hit, this is going to go faster and harder. And this is like 5-MeO DMT. This is like, you are gone. This is not like, a slow ayahuasca where you have an hour or two to kind of begin to get ready to purge. No, this is like you've broken through, you're in another dimension. That's what it was like. And it's like, okay, you guys, we have to begin to think that way. And when you think that way, I think that you're going to see that there are forces at work as opposed to people making radical changes. And the changes, who cares if people, I care if people get fired. And I care about suffering at any time for any length of time.
Absolutely.
But they were going to get fired anyway. They were going to lose their jobs. AI is coming. This is so you want to blame Elon, blame Elon, but it's inevitable. We are in the inevitable place. So you have to look at, this is why I don't go crazy. Is I look at the things that are happening, and it's like, that's inevitable with what's coming. That's inevitable with what's coming. And I happen to also, in order to stay sane, I tend to ascribe positive intent to people, which, people have a lot to say about that as well. But I just do. It's smart. It's smart. If you can do it, do it. Just say, they have a positive intent. And you can even say, but they're ignorant. You can do that. But so I just think like, oh, okay, well, I actually think, okay, this is a positive ascription I put. Trump put Elon there because Elon's pretty smart about AI and could see everything that was going to be changing within, the next 3 years, and begin setting it up for that all to take place. Now, we don't know. That's my positive ascription projection. But I can tell you that it does have me not get caught up in the players and really just look at what's happening behind it. You go.
Absolutely, absolutely. Obviously, that's very difficult to do for some people, but I think you're one of those people that does that maybe just by, I'm not sure if it's natural or you've been, life has kind of like put you in the habit of having to do that. Right. I know, that's what I'm saying. So like maybe
I've been beaten into peace.
Right, beaten into peace. Right. So I guess you have the blessing of having been, beaten into peace. But it was interesting because I was doing some Eros writing yesterday, and I went back to this article, I think it was in the New York Times, where like someone is quoted as saying, Nicole Grok's people. And I'm like, And then my brother sends me something about Grok AI, which is Elon's new interface. And I'm like, wait, there has to be some kind of synergy here. So I asked Leah, where does Grok come from? And she told me that it was a term coined by this science fiction writer, Robert Heinlein, about developing a deep and intuitive understanding.
Well, the people are born this way, that I stand near you and immediately all of your reality flashes here and all of my reality flashes there, and that's how we know.
I see.
And
is that what it?
Yeah, that's how it plays in the book, the instantaneous recognition and knowing. And see, so we always say, like, there are those people who know that that's normal. And then there are those people who have to read about it in a science fiction book. And so, there are certain ideas that I use that you have become familiar with, finite and infinite games. And then this idea of grokking is one of them. When I did the talk on Om, I say that, the empathy system in the human being, it's the difference between dial-up and Ethernet after you do Om. You just you grok people immediately, and then you have to dial it back because people feel like that's invasive or something. So you have to be like, what do you do for work?
But I think in practical terms, Grok is kind of like a metaphor, right?
That's
the way that Elon's using it for his AI user interface. It's kind of like an ironic take on DeepSeek, in the sense that, like, that's what DeepSeek means. That's, I guess, I'm not sure how you would say DeepSeek in Mandarin, or however whatever language it's written in. But I think Elon says, well, Grok is really like a deeper seek than.
That's right.
And so the thing with AI is that the presumption was that you needed a large language model. And I think we were talking about this in the room before the talk. And so the question was, so AI has to have the quantum of all things. And I think that was the whole point of the Towers of Babel, and that the constructor said, look, if we assembled every word of wisdom that had ever been written in every language and we put them all in these towers, then we would be God, right? And so they did that, but it quickly descended into nonsense. And so the message was that God was not the sum of all things, but the generator of all things. And and God was not, just this quanta, but it was the intelligence that permeates the quanta.
That's right.
And so I think that what these creators of these new AIs, DeepSeek and Grok, are saying is like, we're not going to presume that we are going to be able to accumulate all the knowledge that's ever happened, right? But we are going to see if we can intuit things from the bodies of knowledge that we do have. And so we need much less compute, we need much less raw data, and we can produce just as good or better a product. That's the conjecture. And I'm not sure if it's worked yet. I haven't used either product yet, but I think that that's what but to go back to sort of the job situation. So America and most Western economies are built on the labor theory of economics.
That's right.
Almost all of nationalism, as we know, democracy, all these political and economic forces that have defined the modern era, right? Maybe we're in postmodern now, right? Were based on the labor theory of economics, essentially that skilled labor is good for nationalism because those laborers will help grow the country's economy, that would produce a standard of living, da, 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 da. But in the age of abundance, maybe that's not the dominant paradigm anymore. So I remember something that Steve Jobs said back in, like, I want to say like 2011, something like that. And he said, they were asking him, like, what do we do about employment? Because I think we were just coming out of the Great Recession. And he said, you know, I think the fundamental question is, like, not how we find people more jobs. It's, why do people need jobs in the first place?
That's right. Absolutely. Have you read Buckminster Fuller's ideas on this as well? No. And that is, he wrote a whole piece about how people, many of the jobs are jobs that oversee the other person's job. There's the redundancy, but that's because, and this is so fundamentally, our idea is rooted in production as Americans. And so you have to create enough production for everyone to have the American identity. And that's the shift that I do think is happening, is that is not who we will be anymore. And now this is where I want to be part of steering it, because it could go very wrong. It could go very, very wrong. And this is where, I've been preparing for 10 years to steer that identity into becoming creative beings. And, we'll see how it goes, but that would be, and that's why I've always gone for a eudaimonic economy. And so where it's based on each person living in their functionlust, the lust of their function, because I genuinely believe within 10 years there will be a universal basic income for everybody, because you won't be able to work. Every job will be taken. Mopping will be taken.
Every job, yes, absolutely.
Pizza making. I saw a robot pizza maker. Everything. There won't be any jobs. So then you have to get that. What does the world look like without that? And really, I think it looks like my little island off of Africa, where you can only move there if you agree to not work. And we have to see what they're doing, because here's the thing, that this scares me about socialism, and this scares me about the future potential. And that is that that you have to employ that attention after it's unplugged from production. Or you'll end up with Japan, which has massive depression. And so like they pay people to stay alive at this point. It's crazy. There's a beautiful documentary about a Zen priest who is one of the people who's going out and just talking to all of these suicidal people. So but that's what happens if attention isn't productively or creatively employed. It won't be able to be productively employed anymore. I mean, in any meaningful way. We have to shift, and this has been like the glory I've been waiting for.
So maybe the creative economy. So I'm sorry, I looked a little distracted. I read a book like a couple years ago by this lady. She's an economist. Stephanie Shelton, I believe her name is. She wrote, I forgot the name of the book, but she was going to be appointed during the first Trump administration to as head of the Federal Reserve. And her whole thing is about UBI and like why that shift is occurring. And I think her book quite, she's a classical economist, but I think she's kind of like reached the point of, far-seeing this, where she was like, okay, well, Jenga. So she's going further than she realizes almost exactly what you said. She kind of states in a bunch of chapters that, we're kind of like nearing the end of what a labor economics based economy looks like. What will be the defining national characteristics of America when that no longer happens?
That's right.
She felt like UBI could be a unifying American trait. And she kind of spells out how it would look in a situation like that. But, again, that's just one idea. I think UBI is one idea, but also creative economy. What does that look like? There's also situations where I think that maybe because of the tools that we have, right? Because everyone, even if people are working full time, do they need to work for one company full time? Because I feel like, you can plug into so many things now, through payment rails, through, through gig work, through other types of things where you can kind of create a career for yourself without necessarily, either working for one company full time all the time.
Right. But what are they going to be doing, Omari?
Well, there's still stuff to do, right? I mean,
like what?
I mean, we still have to have like, art. We still have to have, I guess, robots can sort of make furniture, but like, can they make horse riding? I mean, can they make horses?
Right. I did see somebody who was saying, they said things like baseball will be, things that you don't want to see a robot doing will be, but I can't even imagine that will be a career at that point. I mean, it's not what you're going to have. You're going to have one career, a baseball player. I don't think so. So then it's like to begin to stretch our minds here. And then, I always think of you as a, what did Russian people call friends? Like a comrade. Yeah, comrade. I think of you as my comrade.
Comrades.
In terms of figuring out how to do some things, because, for example, I think that that the idea that Elon had to give everyone $5,000, this from the. So he did the cuts, and then he said they would give a percentage back to the
taxpayers.
Yeah, taxpayers, and they would start with $5,000 per person. My guess is that that's beginning to float the universal basic income idea, both to see how Republicans will respond, because they aren't big universal basic income people.
They're not.
Unless unless Elon's guiding them, and then how liberals respond. Now the challenge is, how do you because it's that same thing, like, because the planet is becoming conscious through AI and not through the Buddha.
Oh, right. I see.
So how do we tell our people, no, you welcome this? Because right now it's being condemned, but it's the thing that we would have fought for. And that's what we have to figure out, is how to not cut ourselves off at the knees. Like, be very mad at the things worthy being. Right. Worth being mad at.
Well, I think one of the things he's trying to figure out, and this is a very tough mechanism, is payment rails. Yeah. So payment rails are tough because the government is not in the habit of paying people, right? Or, there's a few payment rails like Social Security, right? Like, where there are direct payments to citizens, right? Or maybe tax refunds is probably the only two that most people will have experienced in their lifetimes. Right. China is a little bit further along in this, in that they have payment rails for their citizens, and they're using these digital currencies. But the problem is that they are using them to directly socially control people. That's right. And so I think the big question is that if we have UBI and there are these payment rails, will they be corrupted by trying to implement elements of social control? In the sense that, like, China, if you publish something against the government, they won't take your money, right? What they'll do is, you can't spend your particular money at the airport, or at a selected grocery store. So it gets very granular into how you can control spending and the notions of currency. Like, if you do not have a labor-based economy, the current debt is based on an estimate of the value of American labor each year. That's how America borrows money, right? So if you're not going to have a labor-based economy, then what happens with the dollar? And how do you define net? And if you're not going to use GDP, which is gross domestic product based on production, as a measure of national wealth, then what is it going to be?
Well, see, and this is the place where, so then, I think, this group is touching the leg, and this group is touching the tail, and
the elephant.
And so this is one of the places where I think that the liberals, in terms of understanding globalism, because I see a lot of these things, I just think people don't know why, but they just sense that they're coming.
Mhm.
And so I think that's the place where we'll have, because they won't have a production-based economy either.
No,
And so this is
absolutely.
the place where there'll have to be a unification in terms of, because the money will matter.
Right. So the money has to be denationalized,
Right.
which is a huge undertaking, both militarily, politically, you know, because at this point, you know, the hegemony of the US dollar is too costly to us to maintain.
Right.
Because that means that we have to like operate constant war, constant militarism
Yes.
to dominate international trade, politics in certain countries, resources, blah, 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 blah. And then we're using the dollar politically where, okay, so the opportunity with the dollar was originally that the US was considered more of a neutral country. So coming out of World War II, the Bretton Woods Agreement was that, okay, there won't be any more national currencies. We will develop an international currency. Right. However, that did not.
This is like agreement, the lingua franca nightmare. Yeah.
Right. That agreement quickly fell apart. And so they were not able to develop a universal currency.
Right.
So certain nations still kept their currency. So even though America and Britain were kind of leaders in that movement, they did not want to give up their currency.
That's right.
Domination. So they didn't. And so, but America kind of became the default in global currency because we were viewed as not being involved with everybody else's shit, right? Mm-hmm. Like unbiased enough, or at least uncaring enough to to kind of like engage in commerce without the judgment, without the political control. Right. Now that has gradually changed. And so you have a bunch of countries, like you can't even transact in dollars without the permission of the US government. Right. Even though on paper, at least, the dollar is the most stable currency, but it's become so politically fractured. So even our allies are like, well, if there's sanctions against Iran, but France wants to trade with Iran, it can't. Right. Because the US will say, well, then you cannot then trade with us and we will not allow you to transact in dollars. Right. And so I think that has created enough of a fractionalization politically that you see it's affecting NATO, it's affecting Europe, it's affecting all of our alliances. And so we're going to have to wean ourselves out of currency hegemony as a nation. Maybe AI will be instrumental in that.
I think it can't help but be instrumental. I think every nation is going to have to look at, I think that this democratization of currency that you speak of will happen now. Mm-hmm. That what we tried to have happen will have to happen. Mm-hmm. And then so this is, again, you know, I'm looking at how to get out of suffering, causes of suffering, help others get out of suffering. And so then if you can actually begin to see these pictures, where does this go? Where does this go? Mm-hmm. Okay, so if it's going here, then these are definitely bumps along the way, but I don't need to stop and stare at any one of them. Mm-hmm. I don't need to lose my shit about any one of these because this train is just rolling through all of this stuff. Mm-hmm. So then things like, you know, losing production and then a democratization of currency where there's a global currency as opposed to
a national-based currencies. Right. Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, I think those are parts of the solutions. I don't have a huge amount of insight. I mean, my head's still in the sand mostly. So I do think like what there's like Bitcoin and crypto sort of like they don't work exceptionally well right now.
But Trump did just yesterday.
Right. So he's talking about a reserve. Right. And again, that's kind of the wrong thinking if you're thinking about UBI and if you're thinking about abundance. If abundance is almost the inverse of wealth.
How would you introduce it? So right now
I wouldn't have a national reserve of anything because you're presuming scarcity.
From where you are though, where he is. Right. Now I'm not talking about a long range view. Mm-hmm. If you were to roll it out step by step, how would you roll it out? Now remember you have your constituency and they're going to be a little bit nervous about these things.
Right. I mean, I would just, in the case of like, rather than having a reserve, I would just make Bitcoin legal tender and keep the whatever gold reserves and dollar reserves. I mean, they'll eventually peter out, but I wouldn't just go around trying to accumulate Bitcoin. I mean, that's the point of accumulating things, is that you think you'll run out, that you're assuming scarcity.
Nobody agrees more.
Right.
Amen.
Right. And so if you're going in with the mindset of like, oh, we're going to capture the market in some digital
this
currency,
is what I wonder.
like
if it's a kick backward in the Jenga game in order to be able to get it to the goal.
I think it is obviously the thinking that you need a reserve is current thinking. It's current economic thinking.
Right.
But then the whole point of decentralized finance, of cryptocurrencies, of these types of digital transaction mechanisms is so that you don't need a reserve. you just need to tap in.
Yeah.
You just need a transaction. So all they would have to do, I think, what I would do is just make Bitcoin legal tender today, and that's it. That's the only thing.
I just wonder. I mean, and I don't know. You know, it is very hard to tell where anybody's thinking is right now.
Several countries have done this, by the way, and they did not.
I'm not saying
they did not outlaw their existing currencies. They just made it, and many countries for years have had their own currency and still allowed transactions in dollars. Like if you go to Zimbabwe today.
Omari,
like,
listen,
so
I'm with you.
Yeah.
Like I agree with the outcome. I agree with an even more radical outcome. So we're here.
Okay.
I look at how you do these things. So I do, and again, this is a positive ascription, so I don't know. But I do think that Elon can see the backlash, that what's actually happening is scarier than even Elon. Like with AI, with the changes in terms of causing a collective freeze of the nation. And I look at how would I roll it out? If I were charged to bring, Bitcoin into the mainstream, I'm a conservative. I'm in the conservative party. So my constituency is not big Bitcoin. They aren't Bitcoin fans. So
they're more than the Democrats are at this point.
No,
I mean, all of the states that have applied to do a Bitcoin reserve or brought it up are red states.
Like Mitch McConnell's out there Bitcoining.
Like Montana, like Alabama, like there's probably 6 or 7, maybe 12 states. All of them are red states. So it is, I agree, it has not permeated the mainstream, but if you were going to say which political party has been more favorable, it's definitely Republican.
That's interesting. I always think of it as liberals, especially around Silicon Valley.
I thought so too.
Okay.
So and Silicon Valley is no longer liberal. These are major.
This is true. Now,
these are major assumptions I'm having to deal with this year.
Yeah. No,
These are things are changing.
Silicon Valley can be a little bit hoary, no, Daddy, I'm your political party. No.
Okay, fair enough. You're from there, so you know what's up.
Yeah. But I look at how I would do it. I would look at a lot of these things because we've been talking about this for years, that there will be the dissolution of everything that we know. And so how would you begin to introduce it in such a way that, because right now we're already very close to civil war because people think we're fighting about politics and not this existential crisis that's happening, crisis of enlightenment that's happening, which is actually what I think is happening. We're going through this collective death into enlightenment. Yay, it's great, except for there's a whole world of people who don't understand this unleashing of this flow, because that's really what it is, right? It'll be an unleashing of a creative flow. It'll be an unleashing of a currency flow, and people are just in shock, and so they just know to hold on to what they know. So how do you do it in a way that you do not bring about such a collective freeze that everything shuts down and we have civil war?
Yeah, I'm not sure that we don't do it that way. And like the last time there was a civil war, it was also about an economic model that was, essentially. It was mercantilism and versus industrialism, right? So there was a civil war because the mercantilists, essentially were using free labor that crowded out the free labor of the rest of the American citizens, even though it made America, I guess, titularly wealthy. The creation of wealth was, vastly unequal. And I think that eventually it was just untenable, and the people that were clinging to the wealth did not want to give it up. I think we're in a similar,
But
situation.
I don't think that's what it is. I think I think that's on the road to what's actually happening.
I see. Well, what ended up happening was that essentially the whole country industrialized after the Civil War. So there was
I don't think it's an economic shift we're going through, a political shift, a cultural shift. I think it is a global shift of the planet coming to consciousness, and all of this stuff is a result of it. And we're looking this way, going that way, and we need to be looking this way, going this way. Especially those of us who have some idea that something big is happening. We need to look at okay, how do you unroll it in such a way that you don't have a collective panic, so that people can move into this and not take any of this stuff, I don't like Joe Biden, or I don't like, and not take any of it, or I'm upset about lost money here. Look at where we're going. It will seem virtually inconsequential. It was temporally consequential. How about that? I want to be, because I do know people are actually suffering, but I think the suffering will not be long.
So I think Elon's attempt to give people $5,000 is exactly that, because he knows that, for example, if you go and you cut 1 million jobs, right, which is what they're trying to do, that's going to cause massive pain, and it's going to cause economic dislocation for.
Aren't they cutting them with 8 months pay?
No.
Many of them?
No, my aunt just got her job got, she's not getting another paycheck. So no, they were just casting people out essentially. But and the thing is, that is going to create political backlash. It already is. And even in the Republican Party, if you see these town halls, I was watching these town halls all weekend actually, when I should have been working. And it was just interesting to see why, people that massive amounts of people, these are all people who voted for Trump, who are raging mad, right? Who are like, damn, my mom just got fired from her job as a whatever for NASA or so there's massive. And so the hope is that, okay, well, if we give everyone $5,000, then maybe that will smooth over, this dislocation.
See, but
is that going to work? I'm not sure.
I think it's different. I think if we give everyone $5,000, it introduces them to the idea of your universal basic income, and it does some of that, but and we don't know. We don't know. But to my mind, what we're seeing is things happening that are going all the way over there incrementally. And it looks divisive, but I think that that's an underlying panic about where we're headed. Okay, so that's our. Oh wait, but I want to give you the last word.
I didn't
Your
really
last
need the
words
last
are great.
Famous last words. Right? Keep your head out of the sand. Thank you.
We'll have some reflections. Go ahead and raise your hand. We can start in the room with Lindsay.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
So this is great. I love this topic. I've been thinking a lot about that. I'm doing a bunch of research on polarization right now. And, what's obviously, I think, interesting is people are fighting at the levels symbol and identity. And obviously one solution is, if you identify with left or right, you need a new super identity, right? And our American super identity is not great right now. And you mentioned that, what does it look like to redefine what it means to be part of country or part of world in this new era? And you see an identity based in creativity. Can you just flesh that out a little more with me?
Well, this is what I was talking about yesterday with the power of pull. This new power that is entering, that's unlike any power we've ever known. The power we've known has been force and production, but there's a creative force that is entering, because you are removing consciousness from the substrate. You're removing production from where it's the bond that it's always been. So when that happens, you've been unleashing something, and it'll be this creative force that comes through. It'll be a totally different economy, a totally different way of living, thinking. For example, this is one of the reasons why big pharma can go. We have a culture based in fear, rooted in problems. So there are people who have politics that are rooted in fear. There are people who have their health and wellness is rooted in fear.
Yeah.
If you look at everything, it goes back to fear, and that will be unleashed, and you'll have, and you're afraid because you don't have creative power.
Yeah.
Because you have identity. In identity, there's only one solution. There's one problem, one solution. In creativity, there are only obstacles and many, many, many solutions. So it turns into play. That's where we're headed. But we have to steer the ship well and with great care.
Which means it kind of obliterates the need for a super identity.
It does.
Maybe. Wow,
It-
that's a very insightful statement.
It does for
Yeah.
sure. That's why yesterday I was saying what's happening now, what we're seeing, no matter who's doing it, is the eradication of the ego, the governmental ego. So all of these institutions represent the ego of the United States. It's being destroyed. And then that's where you have to be very careful, because then you have to, what you usher in after that has to be of benefit.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you don't want another identity. You're right. Yeah.
Good question.
Wonderful. And then we'll go to reflections. We have Teresa online.
Hi, I love you both. What an incredible conversation. And, a melding. I'm definitely very left. But it's, and I think a lot has to do with just experiences with racism and sexism and all that stuff. But a couple of things came up for me which the place around in my head is that I always have these thoughts that we need to get rid of borders, we need to get rid of money, and we need to get rid of hoarding. And in some ways, I was hearing that in this. Right? And it's like, how do we become one world? And I can see how we're not one world, but sort of the vision you put out was this thought or this idea that I have that how do we do the one world thing, and encompass all humans, and then even expand that into all life, and protecting the world. And the other thing, when you were talking about creative versus productive, and I see that in my own life, and as soon as you said play, that's what I just had written it down. Play, everything is play. And that's probably what it might have been like to be Native American here before all this happened, and we didn't have borders and money and all these things that we have right now. And we're so outside nature in the way we live, right? Like, what other animal uses money to eat? And what other animal can't just find abundance in the world to eat and not hoard? And, so these are things I think about all the time. And I don't do it as intellectually, so I have to almost follow. What are y'all saying? But this has just been so enlightening. It's just been so refreshing, and I just have to, find the time to keep listening to you guys.
I love you.
I love you.
Can I just say one thing about
Yeah, of
Dr.
course.
Teresa is that, you're one of my favorite people, honestly, just because you do come from this background. Like, I was just up in the Bronx yesterday visiting friends, so I feel you 100%. And
yeah.
But I mean, from what I've heard of your practice and like how you a free thinker, I mean, one, you've come to two, I think you were experimenting around with COVID related medicines that were at best countercultural. There was a few other things that you kind of talk about in passing that I'm like, wow, like she's really a free thinker. It's kind of like not following any playbook. And I know you understand what racism is. I think you, on the other hand, you think clearly about sort of like these issues of pharmacology, of big medicine, and I think you are integrating them into a lifestyle that's very unique. So yeah, I think it'll be people like you who
Me too.
are able to do this. And it's had great
Wow.
results. You look amazing, by the way.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I had this one other thought. I want to grab it back if I can for a second. About what you said. I can't remember. All right, that's good. I can't remember what it
Well,
was.
we're here every Monday.
We're here.
Oh, I know what it is. I know what it is. Can I just say this?
Yeah, of course.
So what I found myself, when I started trying to give children vaccine exemptions, for example, right? I didn't recognize that most of the people who do that, or even who do alternative medicines with oncology or with just all the different things that I do it with hormones, and what I didn't recognize that I was moving into this right-wing world.
That's right.
I see.
I didn't even recognize that. It took me a minute, and I kept being shocked by, I can't hang out with these people. They're like, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's always this other part to me that knows that everything is multidimensional.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so one thing that is hard for me in trying to interact with human beings is that they have a patent answer without thought or without seeing the interdimensionality of how we all are.
That's
what I want to say.
brilliant. That's brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I think that you also have a certain level of adulthood, and we need a political adulthood right now where we can say, I agree with you on this. I don't agree with you on this. I'm not even going to try to change your mind on this. That's where you're at. We're going to meet here.
Mm-hmm.
And where human beings can find the nodes of connection and meet there, and not have it be that I can't talk to you because you believe this over here. No, just do exactly what you're doing. Exactly.
It's almost like, how did you get that way? That's where my mind goes. How did you get that way? How did this whole group of people get that way? What's happening underneath it? I don't see.
Well, here's what I'll say. I don't think there is a group of people. That's what I think. I think that's the number one thing that you learn in semantics is semantic insanity is caused by what's called generalization. And that's where you see a group as opposed to person 1, person 2, person 3, person 4. And my guess is that if you talk to 100 individuals that you consider in this place, you would have very different results than what you perceive. I know I have, because that's what I just started meeting people at principles. In fact, it's been my liberal friends that I've had the hardest time with, because I meet these people on principle. Like you meet, we'll just say the right on the principles around health, right? And so my liberal friend said, oh no, you meet them over here on this, you're not our friend anymore because you didn't check every box. And that's just crazy. That's not how we're going to build it, I don't think. Anyway.
Can I just say also one thing?
Yeah.
Don't tell me. So the eponymous they, it's so funny, right?
Okay.
So there is no they, right? And what made this clear was, I think you sent me a video of what was the vice president for JFK? What was her name?
Nicole.
Yeah, she had the Council of the Canceled or whatever that thing was. So they're sitting there, like they're all like plugged in completely, like tenure professor at Harvard, working at Palantir, Google, blah, 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 blah. And they're sitting there talking about this they, well, they this, and they're literally trying to figure out who the they is, like who specifically. And so she says, you know what, I have to believe we're pretty plugged into everything. And if we can't figure out who the they is, right? I just cried laughing because there's no they, it's just us.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. If we can start there, then, and I'll just say, if anybody ever wants to go on, this is my last part on this, because on this topic, there is somebody, Katrina, who I reposted her piece, because it was a Van Jones type piece where she's a trans woman who went on a call with 1,500 Trump supporters and said that to a person, everyone she interacted with said, I support you. I don't have any issue with who you are. And she could not believe it, and that she had to come away. And her write-up about it is just so balanced and sane and educational. So anyway, if anybody wants to read that, it's up on my Facebook. Go ahead. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Wonderful. We'll go to Mauricio online.
Hey guys, thank you for all the ideas you shared. I'm just grateful how you guys are able to present like new thoughts into the collective, and it's something I've been thinking about lately. Like I went to Agape last night and yesterday, and they said that they were talking about the new thought movement, the history of it. And it's just like people willing to just put new thoughts into the collective and just willing to share ideas. I think we really need it. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
So you're still in LA?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Awesome.
Working.
No, I'm jealous. I want to come back.
Yeah, come back.
It's cold out here.
I know you missed your shirt. You got any over there?
And we'll go to Rachel Hemsey in the room.
That was so good. Felt like I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. And Omari, just the way I've known Nicole a long time. And
Yes.
when you interview her, I get to hear new thoughts that I have never heard out of her before, just because of your interest and like, you're so smart, but also feel so much. And so you're able to bring us into these most amazing places. And I'm so grateful. Yeah. So
It was
great.
like this the first time we had a conversation. Like I was drinking something. I'm like tipping the wine back. We're at Marina Del Rey. And like, I think 2 hours passed. And I was like, well, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to drive home.
And you know what I thought? I thought, oh God, I hope I didn't blow him out.
No, you didn't.
Yeah,
No, you
that's
didn't.
basically what he said, right, we're good. Here we are now, many years
Yeah,
later.
yeah.
Okay, so we're here on
Mhm.
Mondays.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Mhm.
Okay, so we will see you next Monday. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, no, sorry. And I will see you tomorrow. I'll see you tomorrow at 1.